So Sandra and Yuta, the first product concept that you worked on together was the slat. Did you actually design the physical slat, or did you create visual prototypes? Tell us about this process.
When you work for a startup, it's just really important to be really efficient with your time all the time. So I usually start thinking about testing a concept out on a minimal energy level. So what I did is I created just a Photoshop sort of mock-up. The next step was then to actually design the physical slat and really just give it a little more style and identity. It became somewhat apparent as we looked at more and more benches that the benches are all a little too different, that the practicality of even if we had different drill patterns, that the distances are still quite different and sizes are still quite different, that it wouldn't be quite as practical.
But the interesting thing is you probably wouldn't have come to this conclusion without trying.
Of course, yeah. Always keep trying.
Keep trying, and what is the quickest way to try? Yeah. And really validate your idea. It's really important.
That's great. So what happened next?
Then the next step was how can we make it more modular and how can we make it more adaptable, right? So it's like, I said, okay, what if we packed it into the smallest possible box we could make that we could really attach to existing surfaces? So that's where this design came from.
So you're trying to avoid the problem of installing a slat onto a bench, but rather create a box that can exist next to any bench.
Yeah. Next to or on top of a flat surface, exactly.
That's interesting.
So what we noticed is that in an environment like that, it really blends into the urban environment, and people didn't really notice it, right? So, and that for us then was a problem.
So why was it a problem that it was not noticeable?
That's the problem because we're trying to be a public amenity and we want to make it easy and accessible for people to use.
So then it became much more catchy, much more bright, right? And we were thinking, well, in addition, how can we make something that is a little more modular?
Why did you care about modularity?
Modularity is important to address different situations in the city, and every city is a little bit different, right? So we want everyone to have access to the services that we're providing. So we wanted to make it modular enough so that we, one, can make our own product, but then also maybe piggyback onto other physical infrastructure.
That's really cool. So modular, visible.
So at this point, I really said like, hey, let's just take a step back. What if we made a piece of furniture that could be used as a box alone, but also as a standalone unit and as an entire bench? So we can give clients the option. We have different tiers. And so this is where this design came from. So this is an entire bench that can stand alone, but it also can stand next to existing seating surfaces, or it can be mounted on top of existing surfaces, as we just seen in the previous iteration.
And just to be clear, you didn't design that physical bench. You designed visual prototypes of it.
This were just renderings, but we were running around the local community, our friends, and would just literally show it to everybody and say like, hey, what do you think about this? And that was something like super valuable. A lot of inventors, a lot of startups actually really protect their designs and don't share it before there's a copyright in place, a design patent in place, and are very secretive about it. We've really taken the opposite approach, and we had said like, okay, we're going to use our community, we're going to engage them, we want their feedback, and we're going to leverage that to design a better product.
That's really great. And so what did you learn in this process? You started showing this design.
One comment that we also got from this design, for instance, was that it's somewhat asocial. People are separated, but actually, as we said, we want to be like a social magnet. We really want to bring people together. So in this design, they were separated. So that's when the next design came into play, where people can sit next to each other.
And that was a really funny one, actually.
That was a very funny one. Like, again, we showed it around to our local community, our friends, and entrepreneurs.
And Pip was the one at the Media Lab. She's an amazing designer, and she works on bringing emotions into a design, and she's actually developing great software for that. And we kind of looked at it and we were like,
she analyzes shapes and colors and what sort of psychological influence that.
Yeah, and we said like, it's kind of like a sad, fat baby.
But then, taking into consideration this shape factor, we went to somewhat very close to what the final product today looks like, which is this design, where basically we just flipped it, you know. And then there's also, okay, we have 2 outlets, the other one had 1, we have 2 outlets here, so it becomes even more social. This was the final rendering, and this is basically how it resulted in the end. And it was funny, talking about this really tight deadline. We started the design process, I think, in March with a slat, February maybe. And well, I was in Spain in May, at the end of May, and I got an email, and somewhere between the lines it said, like, we have to present the SUFA in 2 weeks at the White House. And so, voila, 2 weeks later, 17th of June, we presented the SUFA, from like starting the whole process of all the designs that you've just seen, presented it at the White House. And there he is.